Charles is on a business trip too. I've heard Charles is out of town for work. I haven't heard anything about his trip getting shorter. The lights have been on every night, though. Neighbor gave a puzzled look. Things got a bit awkward between the two of us, but the neighbor just went back to their house. I wonder what's going on. Charles was supposed to be on a business trip for a week, and it doesn't make sense for him to be home without letting me know. As I thought about it, I came up with a possible explanation. So, I called Linda, my mother-in-law, and made a suggestion. Can you and your husband come over to our house secretly? Charles's birthday is coming up soon, and I want to surprise him. Linda replied. Of course, honey. A surprise sounds so thrilling. We'll head over shortly, just hang tight for us. With that, she hung up. All right. Things are about to get interesting. I grinned. My name's Jennifer, and I'm turning 33 this year. Charles and I have been married for 3 years. We met at the company we used to work at. We don't have kids yet. I only switched jobs a year ago. I'm still getting the hang of my job, and I'm worried about inconveniencing the company if I were to take maternity leave right away. So, I want to get more comfortable with my work first before thinking about having kids. I changed jobs to further develop my skills. Charles and I were in the same sales department, him being my senior. I often sought advice from Charles whenever I couldn't meet my sales targets. He even accompanied me on major client appointments. We grew closer as I consulted with him regularly. And soon we were dining out and hanging out together, building a close relationship. Then one day, during one of our usual dinner outings, Charles suddenly proposed. I'm in love with you, Jennifer. I want you to marry me. Having trusted him through our work together, I replied. I'd be happy to. The joy on Charles's face when I accepted was unforgettable. He thanked me repeatedly, saying, Thank you. I'm gonna make you the happiest woman alive. Seeing Charles so elated, I felt sure of the happiness that lay ahead. We live not too far from Charles's parents, who reside in the next town over. It's a comfortable distance for me, better than living with them, at least. At the beginning of our marriage, they weren't too thrilled about my job. Because they believed that my dedication to work might delay us starting a family. Jennifer, don't you want kids soon? Maybe you don't have to work that hard, you know. Every time I met her, my mother-in-law would repeat this like it was her catchphrase. My father-in-law, perhaps eager for a grandchild, would always tell me, I want to hold my grandchild. Charles is my only child, so you're our only hope, Jennifer. My father-in-law had just retired from a regular office job, and my mother-in-law was a stay-at-home mom. Charles was an only child, making them a family of 3. Perhaps because Charles is their only child, it seems they expect me to have several children. I think they might also want to heir. Charles wants a lot of kids, right? I've overheard my father-in-law asking Charles this question numerous times, and my mother-in-law would say things like, I'll be there to help raise the kids with Jennifer. You can rely on us anytime. Charles probably got used to his parents' comments. He would only respond with, Thanks. Well, kids are a blessing, and we can't tell when they'll come to us. He never really defended me, so there were times I honestly didn't want to visit my in-laws. But they aren't bad people. I made some homemade roast beef for you. I remember you said you liked it. I hope you like it. My mother-in-law would often say, bringing me some of her dishes. I admire my mother-in-law for being able to make homemade roast beef, and I genuinely appreciate the delicious food. My father-in-law has his good sides too. Sometimes he would quietly hand me some pocket money, saying, It's not much. I'm not sure if he does the same for Charles. It's nice that he'd give it to me, his daughter-in-law. With such in-laws, I've managed to maintain a relationship of neither being too close nor too distant. However, the pressure for a grandchild from them isn't my only concern. My work has its own set of challenges. Especially with business trip. The company I switched to requires a lot of business trips. At my previous job, female employees had some considerations, so long trips were limited. But it's different now. Perhaps because it's a sales job for construction materials. There are frequent trips. With all products developed in-house, clients are spread across the country, from New York to California. Regularly hopping from one place to another is the norm for proposal sales. Initially, I knew nothing about construction materials, so it was tough. Moreover, most of the business clients are men. At times, some would be dismissive, almost implying, "I can't discuss this with a woman." Being brushed off or not taken seriously was a regular occurrence. However, when a company accepts my proposal, the satisfaction is immense. And when I visit a completed building using our products, it's an inspiring experience that boosts my motivation. But, as I felt more accomplished in my job, the number of trips increased proportionally. Lately, I've been traveling once or twice a month, ranging from short 2-day trips to ones lasting over a week. Some months, I'm barely home due to business trips. It seems my in-laws are not happy with this. One day, when visiting my in-laws with Charles, my mother-in-law sternly questioned, "Jennifer, what do you think of Charles? Don't you want to stay home and cook for him?" She must have been worried about her son. Especially since she's been a stay-at-home mom her entire life, she probably assumed that it's only natural for a woman to prioritize the household. After that, I got an hour-long lecture from her. During this, my father-in-law just sat there, looking extremely awkward, like he'd become part of the furniture. Maybe Charles felt sorry for me getting grilled by his mom, because he jumped in to defend me. "Jennifer's been working hard, you know. I'm often away on business trips, so please, don't be so hard on her." And Charles gave me a reassuring pat on my shoulder. My mother-in-law seemed surprised, probably not expecting Charles to stick up for me. Maybe she thought she was conveying her son's feelings to me. "Well, if Charles says so," she remarked, sounding resigned. Seeing her act like this made me think that she really must love and worry about her son deeply. That was an eventful day. I had spent most of that week on a business trip in Chicago. Initially, I had planned for a week, but my proposal to the client went smoother than anticipated, so I was able to come home 2 days earlier. I was thrilled about this unexpected change, but when I had informed Charles about my business trip schedule, he said, "My trip's gonna be the exact same time as yours. So don't worry, just do your best, Jennifer." So, Charles shouldn't be home yet. Although I was glad to be back early, I felt a tad lonely thinking I'd be alone at home. However, as I approached the house, something felt off. To my surprise, I noticed the lights were on, particularly in our bedroom on the second floor. As I stood there, dumbfounded, neighbor called out to me, "Jennifer! I'm so sorry about yesterday." Neighbor is a young woman in her early 20s. She is living with her husband and baby. "Yesterday? What happened?" I was caught off guard and must have looked puzzled. Neither Charles nor I were home yesterday, so there's no reason for her to apologize. Then the neighbor started explaining. "For the past few days, my baby has been crying a lot during the night. You must have heard it, right? I was worried that we might have disturbed your sleep." She looked genuinely apologetic and concerned. However, I thought there must be some misunderstanding. Huh? Charles is on a trip. I had heard from Charles that he was away. And he hadn't mentioned anything about returning early. Really? The lights were on every night. I think they've been on every night for the past week. Sometimes, when my baby is crying at night, I carry him out to the balcony to soothe him. Our balcony faces your house directly, so I thought maybe you haven't been on business trips lately. Neighbor looked surprised. It created an awkward atmosphere between us, but then neighbor was called by her child from inside her house and went straight back home. What's going on? I was increasingly puzzled. Charles was supposed to be on a business trip this week. It's impossible for him to be home without notifying me. The reason I think so is that Charles can't cook at all. In the past, I would prepare a lot of meals in advance and freeze them. If I didn't get the food ready to just microwave, Charles wouldn't be able to eat. Suddenly, I wondered if he might have gone back to his parents' place. I decided to call Linda, my mother-in-law, to check. "Hey Linda, has Charles been coming over for dinner all this week?" I asked as soon as she picked up the phone. "No, he hasn't been here," Linda replied with a surprised tone. "That's strange. If he didn't go back home, what was he doing for dinner?" As I thought about it, one reason came to mind. Then, I made a suggestion to Linda on the phone. "Can you and your husband secretly come over? Charles's birthday is coming up soon, and I want to surprise him." Linda replied, "Of course, honey. A surprise sounds so thrilling. We'll head over shortly, just hang tight for us." I knew she wouldn't hesitate to come. She's the kind of person who doesn't think too deeply about things. Alright, this is gonna be exciting. I grinned slightly. Jennifer, we are here. About 15 minutes later, my mother-in-law came, bringing along my father-in-law. They both must really love their adorable son, Charles. Perhaps it's because I mentioned a surprise for Charles beforehand, but they had such excited expressions on their faces. What's the surprise gonna be? My father-in-law asked me with a slightly playful tone. Charles thinks I'm still on a business trip and haven't come home yet. He must be feeling lonely by himself right now. So, I thought we could all sneak into the house and give Charles a little surprise. I was thinking of ordering everyone's favorite Chinese dim sum for dinner later. How does that sound? I shared the plan I had thought of before my in-laws arrived. Of course, I have a different motive, and there's a hidden agenda to the plan I shared with them. However, it doesn't seem like my in-laws suspect my surprise plan at all. Sounds fun! Everyone loves Chinese, so let's order the premium stuff. It'll be on me. My father-in-law said with a sudden smile. Should we also get some wine later? Charles will surely be surprised. My mother-in-law seemed genuinely pleased. Seeing my in-laws so genuinely joyful made me feel a bit guilty. Thinking about what might happen next, which could steal away their smiles, made me feel a bit uneasy. However, I managed to suppress those feelings and, without showing any emotion on my face, said, "Shall we go then? From here on, it's a surprise, so please be quiet, both of you." I then quietly unlocked the door and we all entered. There was no light in the entrance, but the outside brightness made things somewhat visible. That's when I noticed. As I had suspected, a pair of red high heels that weren't mine, neatly placed side by side. At that moment, my face went blank, but my in-laws didn't notice. When I glanced at their faces, they still seemed thrilled. They were probably imagining Charles's surprised face, unable to hide their smiles. We then quietly made our way up the stairs towards the bedroom on the second floor. Light was seeping from the bedroom, and there was a faint presence of someone inside. As we got closer, we could hear voices. I pretty much guessed what was happening, so I wasn't shocked. However, my in-laws were probably puzzled to hear voices coming from a room where Charles was supposed to be alone. They both looked a bit bewildered. Without a word, I went up the rest of the stairs and opened the bedroom door. As expected, Charles was in the bedroom. "Jennifer! Why are you here?" Charles said, looking surprised. "I finished my business trip early and came home." "What's going on here?" I spoke to Charles. Next to Charles was a familiar-looking woman. Well, Charles seemed at a loss for words. That figures. The woman with Charles was Linda, who worked at the same company as Charles as a receptionist. I used to work at the same company as Charles before I switched jobs, so I recognized Linda's face. She's younger than me and had just started right out of college. Her hair was brown and beautifully curled. Her nails and clothes were on point, showing she put effort into her appearance. However, even when I was at our old company, Linda had a reputation. And not in a good way. With her looks, it's no surprise Linda is a receptionist. She's very cute. She probably doesn't struggle to find boyfriends. But Linda has a bit of a manipulative side. Rumors had it that she'd frequently switch between men she was dating. A good friend of mine, who secretly dated someone from our company, lamented how Linda managed to snatch him away at some point. That time, I had to listen to my colleague vent till the last train, and all I could do was console her. After hearing such things multiple times, I couldn't help but see Linda as an enemy among women. As I was lost in those thoughts, Linda spoke. "Isn't that Jennifer?" "What a coincidence," she said cheerily. She seemed utterly unaware of doing anything wrong. "Linda, do you realize what you're doing? Charles is my husband, you know." I asked Linda, trying to keep my cool. Though I was a tad irritated, I did my best to hide it. Linda chuckled and said, "Of course I knew. I originally worked at the same company with you, and I tend to want things even more when they belong to someone else." Saying this, she teased me. Twirling her hair with her fingers, she looked at me with a mischievous grin. Indeed, Linda was just as wild as the rumors suggested. She didn't seem fazed by the situation at all. In fact, she seemed to be enjoying the drama. I wonder if Charles couldn't stand this atmosphere. Charles hesitated and began to speak to me. "Sorry, Jennifer, you've been traveling a lot lately. I've been kinda lonely, And eating microwaved meals alone just isn't the same. Then Linda said she'd cook for me and take care of me, so When I glanced at Charles, his cheeks were slightly flushed. He must be gradually falling for Linda. I let out a heavy sigh and said, "So, that's the situation. What should we do, mother-in-law, father-in-law?" Addressing my in-laws, who were visibly shocked by the unexpected turn of events. My in-laws were standing near the stairs, out of Charles and Linda's view. My father-in-law stood with his mouth wide open in shock. "Why are Mom and Dad here?" Charles hurriedly approached and was bewildered when he saw his parents near the stairs. "You mean these are Charles's parents? Why are they suddenly here?" Even Linda seemed taken aback. She probably hadn't expected not only me but also his parents to be present. "Jennifer planned a surprise for Charles, right? So why are you doing this?" My mother-in-law was in tears over Charles's indiscretion. This was just too much for her. "What the hell? You don't care about Jennifer and you're cheating on her." My father-in-law shouted at Charles, trembling with rage. My in-laws have always been close, and I've never seen them fight. This situation was probably unimaginable for them. While I was thinking about this, Charles started complaining to me. "Jennifer, why'd you call Mom and Dad? It's totally uncool to drag my parents into this." Charles glared at me. "It seems that I'm to blame for everything because I called his parents." Linda sided with Charles and said, "That's so low of you, Jennifer." My in-laws seemed quite irritated by Charles and Linda's remarks. After all, it's clear to anyone that the one cheating is in the wrong. My father-in-law was so angry, his face was so red. "Aren't the worst ones Charles and Linda?" "Not just Charles, but it's totally unreasonable for him to cheat in the house I live in too," I said, looking straight into their eyes. I countered firmly. "Just because you were on a business trip, huh? It's my house too, I did nothing wrong." Charles replied defiantly. Linda nodded in agreement. "My house, you say? Do you even know who owns this house?" I asked Charles. In a smug manner, Charles responded, "Isn't it ours? It's clearly property shared between the two of us." I sighed deeply. "No, it's in my name. Remember when you couldn't get approved for the mortgage because you had too many credit card debts? That's why it had to be in my name. Plus, you haven't paid your share of the mortgage. Ever since we moved in, I've been the one paying for everything." Neither of Charles's parents knew about this. They both looked quite shocked. They probably assumed Charles was taking care of the payments. Quick to defend himself, Charles said, "All right, maybe you're right about the house. But I've been covering car maintenance and groceries, haven't I? You've had it easier financially because of that." I was taken aback by Charles's argument. Charles mentioned about car maintenance, but he is the only person uses car. Today he used his car for commuting, but I usually take the train. Most of the time, I travel for work, using planes and trains, so I don't really feel the need for a car. The train station is within walking distance, so I have no issues getting around. "So, you are the only one using the car, right? And about the groceries, I usually do the shopping at the grocery store. Are you saying the groceries are for Linda? That has nothing to do with me, does it?" Charles's face turned a shade redder, seemingly having hit a nerve. I was utterly disappointed, and it seemed his parents felt the same. They were both at a loss for words. "Anyway, a divorce between you and I is what's best, right? I'll be seeking monetary compensation for my mental suffering from both you and Linda. Also, since this house is mine, could you both leave right now?" The mention of divorce changed the color of Charles's face. Hearing about my mental suffering, Linda went pale. "Jen, you're joking about the divorce and suing us, right? I wouldn't be able to make it on my own," Charles said, going pale. Considering how Charles has been spending his money, his reaction was not surprising. "You've hardly contributed to our household finances since we got married. I bet you spent it on having fun with Linda or on whatever you felt like," I pointed out. Charles fell silent. Linda seemed taken aback by Charles's behavior. Then my father-in-law, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Jennifer, we're truly sorry. We had no idea Charles had been causing you so much trouble." My father-in-law seemed genuinely remorseful. And then my mother-in-law addressed me. The reason Jennifer has been working so hard is because Charles wasn't contributing to the household. We truly don't know what to say. We're so sorry. My mother-in-law was on the verge of tears. Charles's negligence must have been a shock to them. Speaking to Charles's parents, I said, I've tried to make it work because I used to love Charles. But after such a betrayal, I've come to dislike him. I'm sorry to both of you, but I'll be seeking a divorce. I conveyed this to my in-laws, who had taken care of me in so many ways. My father-in-law responded, Of course. We'll make sure Charles takes responsibility for this. We truly apologize for everything. He sincerely apologized to me and was getting teary eyes. Although I told him he doesn't need to apologize to me, he kept his silence and looked apologetic for a while. Then, my in-laws took Charles and Linda and left. I remained in the house, feeling a mix of sadness and regret, and cried. Later on, the divorce went through smoothly. Through the lawyer my father-in-law introduced me to, I demanded settlement from Charles and Linda. I was able to collect $10,000 from each of them. Being able to collect this amount was also thanks to my father-in-law. He apparently gave them both a long lecture when he took them home that day. You betrayed Jennifer with what you all did. You all better show some real sincerity, he said. But neither Charles nor Linda had the money. Both of them liked to splurge on themselves. So, for the time being, my father-in-law fronted the $10,000 for each of them, and it seems Charles and Linda will repay him later. I'm nothing but grateful to my father-in-law. As for what happened to Charles and Linda afterward, turns out both of them left their jobs. Rumors about Charles and Linda had been circulating in the company for a while. And when my divorce with Charles was finalized, their relationship came to light. Given the circumstances, the company felt the need to take some action. Their solution? Transfer him to a remote branch. Charles was moved to a tiny branch office in a rural area with just a handful of employees. There was absolutely nothing fun around that branch. Apparently, he couldn't handle it, so he resisted and decided he was gonna quit. Of course, his resignation was accepted right away. Linda, being a contract employee, wasn't offered a contract renewal. There had always been negative talk about her in the company, and this incident seemed to be the last straw. An old colleague, who I was close with at my previous company, filled me in on all this. I thought to myself, they got what they deserved. It is what it is. Around the time Charles left his job, he called my cell phone multiple times. At first, I ignored him, but he was so persistent that I finally picked up. What do you want now? When I answered, Charles said in a desperate voice, Finally! Please, you gotta help me out! From what Charles shared, he'd been job hunting since he left his previous job but hadn't been able to secure a new position. He'd been living with his parents, so he was getting by. However, one day, his father-in-law told him to sell his car to repay a debt of $10,000. After selling the car and giving the $10,000 to his father-in-law, he was told, You're no longer needed here. Go wherever you want and live your life. It seemed Charles had been essentially disowned. I tried asking Linda, but she's in a similar situation with no money. The only person I can rely on is you. Can you please help me out? He pleaded. Why would I help someone who did what you did? We're strangers now. I firmly told Charles off. Yet, Charles wouldn't give up. Actually, I'm right outside your house now. Can you let me in? Perhaps because he was desperate, Charles wouldn't back down. So, I calmly told him. Someone else is living in that house now, you know? I've moved away and live somewhere completely different. In fact, I'd rented that house to someone else. The rent was covering the mortgage, so it's breaking even for now. Well, Charles must have been really shocked, as his voice trailed off towards the end. I don't think we'll ever see each other again, so, goodbye. I told Charles that and hung up the phone without waiting for a response. Then, I immediately blocked Charles's number. 3 years have passed since then. I'm as busy as ever. However, one major thing has changed. That's having a child. Turns out, I met someone new after that and got remarried, giving birth to a healthy baby boy. I love my husband, he's really sweet, but oh boy, my child is just adorable. Right now, I'm on parental leave, taking care of my child every day. Of course, I absolutely love the hustle and bustle of work. That's never gonna change. But the cuteness of my own child? That's unbeatable. Even though every day is super hectic, I'm looking forward to spending fun times with my family of 3.